Okay, let's see. We do expect that people can hear us now. Can people maybe, I don't know if people can give us a,
Yes.
There's a thumbs up from somebody. So it looks like we started the meeting, and I am guessing that people can see my front screen. Here we go for GitHub office hours call, January 2025. So this is the first of our office hours calls. We've talked about for quite some time. We wanted to do these calls. I'm in a meeting here with Maria and Alexander, who also works on They'll Go for GitHub. They'll share their camera, and we'll try to answer your questions, have a discussion on topics. The agenda for the meeting is kind of, I'll go through very quickly what's new, what we've done over the last month. I know that since this is the first, I should go through what we've done for the last X years, but that's going to be a long meeting then. So we're just going to take what's new in the latest release very quickly, and then go on to Q&A and an open discussion on various topics, what's on your minds. So let's dive right into what's new. Let me know if you can see the agenda slide now. Somebody with a thumbs up, I guess. Yep.
Yes.
Nice, thank you. So in the latest release, in the latest month, we released version 6.3. There were 4 things in that one, besides some fixes and stuff like that. Conditional settings were now applied on. You can now define conditional settings on build mode as well. We have preprocessor symbols. That's something a number of partners asked for. And then no more this build artifacts. I'll explain that in a second. And then a new versioning strategy also requested by one of our partners. So let's just have a look at the very first one here. So if you look at the left-hand side, you'll be able to see the settings that it takes to do conditional settings. Conditional settings is really, you can make some settings, and the settings file is defined when these conditions are met. And you can do conditions on which workflow. You can do it on now build modes as well, and various other topics. You can put the conditions on, and then some settings. So what I've done here is I've defined two different build modes, the default and the next major. And then I've set conditional settings on if the build mode is next major, then use these settings, like override what's in the settings file normally. Looking at the actual build, you'll see that it now builds the first project twice, once as default and once as next major. And if you dive into the next major build, you'll see the top line there. It applies preprocessor symbols next major, which you use in your AL code to make sure that you're using the right code there, or version number. You can do whatever. The preprocessor symbols is really something you define. And you'll see the artifacts down there as BC inside or something, and that also applies from the condition settings. Next one, no more this build artifacts. Now this build is something we've had from the very beginning. If you had multiple projects, we would create this build artifacts in order to use them when building the next project, in order to have dependencies resolved from a multi-project repository. This build artifacts lasted for 20 hours and was only used for the build process and not meant for public consumption, or what would you say? And they were kind of, annoying. Then we also had requests from partners that they wanted us to generate artifacts from pull requests, from current workflows, from next major and next minor workflows. They wanted us basically to leave the artifacts within the build, even though they weren't producing artifacts for shipping. but maybe for people wanted to use pull requests for deploying to an environment so that they could kind of test the bits before they actually approve the pull request. So what we did was we removed this build artifacts, and we always produce normal artifacts in a build process now. So in a multi-project repository, you will now see the right-hand side where you have the various projects and the apps and the dependencies and stuff like that. And those can be actually used whatever. You will have different names of these artifacts based on which workflow it is. So from the CI/CD, you will have the project, the branch, and apps, and the version number. In the next major, you will have the next major name in there as well, and then a date, I think, date time after that. So there'll be various names, so you can enumerate the artifacts and see that it's the right ones. New versioning strategy. Normally, we've always said that major minor comes from app.json, build release comes from ALGO for GitHub. Now it's actually major minor build, if you use versioning strategy 3, that comes from your app.json, and then only the revision number now becomes the run number. What does this mean? Well, it actually works pretty well when you do a release, because there you have to do a semver, like 3 digits. And here you'll have the 3 digits from your app.json to release, and we'll only be counting the very last of the 4 digits when you actually make a new build. So you would name your build version 1.0.1, and then when you run the create release, you'd be able to say, I'll add like plus 0.1, and it would be 1.1.0, or you'd add like plus 0.0.1, and you'll add 1 to the third digit. So it's the same as the normal versioning strategy, just 3 digits are now determined by app.json, and the 4th digit is now the run number. If you rerun a build, like if something fails and you reran, then in the old days, you would have the 4th digit be the run attempt. That no longer applies. If you rerun, it's just the same version number. It's not going to add anything to that one. So with that, I think we will switch over to open discussion and Q&A. I don't know if people can actually unmute themselves or if they have to use the Q&A pane, but people need to use the Q&A pane. Let's see if we have any questions there. Not a single one in my list. Maybe I'm in the wrong location. No. Can somebody say hello or create a post, whatever, in the Q&A pane so that we can see that that it actually is working. Maybe nobody could hear what I'm saying, and I've just been talking for like 10 minutes.
Okay. We do have questions.
Todd says hi. Hi, Todd. Okay.
Oh, we have a question in the chat, though.
We have a question. What's new in regards to performance? Getting a faster check if the build compiles. So, a few things. One of the things we did, I can't remember, I think that was in December, we did a change in the run-AL pipeline inside of the BC Container Helper. That actually now, if you set that you want to use compiler folder and you use a container, you'll actually be compiling using the compiler folder, and you'll create the container after all the compile is done. Now, it means that the entire build will get a little slower, but it means that the compile will be faster. There's also other ways of handling this. So you could imagine that you would have multiple projects where you have the tests in a separate project, and actually just build the various projects first and then run the tests in a separate project. We do have a an item in our backlog to document these various ways of setting up ALGO to get best performance or best matching, whatever people needs. And it might be that we should like up the priority of these documentations in order to make sure that you can do that. But if you want, like, I think a good mechanism would be to like structure your repository so that you have the only place you need the container really is in when you're running the tests. So you could build using compiler folder in your projects that contain the source code and the tests really, and then you could run the tests in a separate project. Yeah. See if we have other questions and posts.
Yes.
Todd asks about actions. What does the use workflow from branch do? Does it mean the workflow runs on the context of that branch for all source and configuration?
This is the GitHub one.
Yes. So that's the top. Yeah, not radio button. It's the top drop down. It means that the code in the workflow is from that, and I think we also honor that, so we'll use that branch as the branch for which we are like taking the source and stuff like that. Now, be aware that if you have an old branch, then you will actually be running the action on the old version of ALGO if you're running in that one. Now, Maria is working on a PR where we can like update ALGO system files in multiple branches. So if you're using multiple branches, you'd be able to keep them all to the same version of ALGO. Because if you pick this one and you have a very old branch, you'd be running old code that might not work anymore. But yes, you'll be running in the context of that branch for source and configuration and settings files and everything. We'd be reading that from there.
I think you need to get it from top to bottom because there was a previous question from
maybe.
Thomas.
Okay, let's see.
I can
you do this? Is there a possibility to automatically run publish to environment? We'd like to update production environments outside of working hours. Yeah, it's actually a question we've had from quite some people. Right now, you cannot do a schedule on that because it requires some input. There is a mechanism to do that by creating a small YAML file that actually spawns the publish to environment, and you can put a schedule in that one. That requires you to create a small YAML file. I think I already have a GitHub suggestion on this one, but I should create a document for how to do that as well. I'll take some notes here. So yeah, publish to environment on a schedule. We'll take a note that we'll create a documentation on how to do that inside of ALGO within the next week or two. I promise if I haven't done that, raise an issue on GitHub and say, you promised, and I'll make that happen. Already asked hands up thoughts. Is there a possibility to deploy only apps that really changed? Imagine a project with a lot of apps, only the ones changed. Deployment deploys all apps. Florian, you're right. That is how it works right now. There is an open PR called incremental builds. That one will only build the apps that are changed or depends on apps that are changed. So if you modify the very low level app, you'll still rebuild all apps and actually deploy all apps. But if you are just modifying one app, it will only rebuild that one app. And then the version number of all the other apps in the repository will be the same. And then it will only deploy the modified or rebuilt apps. It's not really, so we heard this, actually, we had a roundtable at Directions EMEA where some of our partners mentioned the same thing. Deployment takes a lot of time. Building does not necessarily take a lot of time, but deployment does. So if we can just build the apps that are really changed, then deployment would take over and figure out, oh, that app is already installed, so don't bother with that one. And that's the PR that is open. We're expecting that one to get in preview within the next few weeks. Inge Magnebrovik asks, have you planned to spend one of these office hours slots to do an introduction to ALGO for GitHub for partners that are new to ALGO for GitHub or are in the process of deciding what DevOps tools to use in their organization? We haven't, like, I think the office hours is typically for people who are, new people can listen in, but it's typically for people to answer the questions that people have when they are trying or they're working with this. We could do another office hours calls for people that are new to ALGO for GitHub, like really a directions session or whatever. We will be at directions as well, both in North America and EMEA, and maybe also in Asia this year. And we'll do like getting started. We had a very good getting started session last year where I taught Jonas Blunk how to use ALGO for GitHub on stage, and that worked pretty well. We could do stuff like that, I think, in a session, in an office hours session.
There's also the launch event sessions.
Yeah, the launch. That's it. Is there getting started on that?
I think so. There is.
Really, what's new?
There's also.
There's an old one then. The last year there's only getting what's new.
Maybe. I remember there was also like getting started as well.
Yeah. But point taken, Inge, and we'll look at that. Florian, I recently found out that there are already many ALGO usage examples on GitHub in the form of repositories. Is there a list with a short explanation of individual use cases? That would be a good idea to have. I don't have a list per se. I did start, like, let me roll back to the first slide here. I did start a repo here called GitHub Business Central Apps ALGO Office Hours 2025-1. This repository contains all the samples where I took the screenshots in this office hours course, and I'll use the same naming for one. But maybe we should have like a list. There is actually, if you go aka.ms/bc samples, you will find some samples apps, but they are kind of, a little larger. It's the Bing Maps app, and there's a few other with the Power Platform integration, and there's the onboarding one from CERN. But maybe we should have, probably use more of repositories in the usage documentation and actually keep these repositories and keep them alive instead of just having them short-lived and not maintain them. That's a good idea. Point taken, Florian. We'll look at that as well. There's a new change, have page scripting tasks for the results using ALGO for GitHub or Azure pipelines. That's this new change. So Manish, so Sebastian is actually here as well. So he's joined. And he is working on a results viewer for ALGO for GitHub. We don't focus on Azure pipelines in this team, but we are working on a results viewer for page scripting tasks. We're also working on figuring out if we can run the page scripting tasks as part of deployment. So when you're deploying to a QA environment, you could define that you would like to run the page scripting tasks in that environment as well, so that you can kind of see with your customers' data or with your test data or whatever, that your page scripting tasks actually completes that one. But I'll expect the results viewer to be done before we ship version 7 in April. Isn't that a good?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if we're going to make it with the page scripting test and QA environment. The primary problem there, I think, is that the current page scripting runner doesn't work with MFA, and a lot of people have or must enable MFA for their authorization or authentication, actually. So that one requires some investigation, some troubleshooting. What is the recommended way to download external dependencies like Conditional? Currently, we have it on a server and manually have to maintain it. So the recommended way is to use NuGet. I don't know if Conditional has a NuGet feed. I don't think we have been specifying in a good way how partners should do this. But ALGO for GitHub does support NuGet both like as a provider and as a consumer of NuGet packages. So if you trusted a NuGet feed from Conditional, then you'd be able to have automatic dependency resolution through that one. Right now, we do automatically trust the symbols feed from AppSource. So the AppSource symbols should be updated, but you can only compile the app, so you wouldn't be able to run tests in a container with those things. So, but I think NuGet is the answer to this problem, and we will be looking into that as we've been looking into that for a long time, and it's probably been too long time. I'll ping actually Conditional to ask if they have a NuGet feed, just to know where they are and what they do. Any news regarding the future of local dev env creation of development containers, features like installing packages from private repositories, external dependencies and stuff like that? NuGet feed, GitHub packages are not supported. Yeah, so when running the local dev env, your GitHub user need to have permissions to read everything that you can install in that container. If you don't have permissions to that, then we cannot get to that. Now, there's no real way around that at this time. Yeah, I don't know if there's any way to fix this. Right now, local dev env builds the entire thing and publishes things to a container. I've been thinking about whether it should not do that, whether it should take the latest good build from GitHub and actually download the binaries and just install them. And then you have something that is running, and that you now have the source, maybe newer source than what's installed, but you still have easier access to all these dependencies because they would be in GitHub artifacts as apps, test apps, and dependencies, especially with the latest fix. If you go into a branch now, you'd actually have these as well. So maybe we should start discussion on that on GitHub ALGO and see if that would be something that would be good to do. Yeah, so Philip, you asked the same question. We had that as one of the first questions. I'll make a documentation on how to do that. It's not something.
Can you read the question?
Oh, the question, yeah. It seems like cron schedules are supported on CI/CD runs by Go. Are there any plans for making it possible to schedule deployment published to environment in a similar fashion? And yes, we've heard that from a number of partners, and we will document how to do that as things are today. In a later fashion, like going maybe a year or two from now, we are talking about not actually. So publishing to an environment is pushing from your GitHub repo into an environment. What we're talking about the future should look like is you're publishing to a NuGet feed, and you're actually installing from the environment. So you define on the environment when you want to install the update or when you want to take the update from NuGet, and that's something we are looking into, whether that would be a good way of solving that. But right now, publish to environment is the only way you can do that, and the way to automate that is to create a small YAML file next to that one and define what you want to do there. I'll create a small documentation sample on how to do that and add that, and I think I promised to do that within the next 2 weeks, so expect it to be done there. Did I miss anyone here? No, I think.
You can now archive the questions by them.
So Florian added a comment to his questions about the GitHub packages in NuGet. Actually, right now, if you use the setting called generate dependency artifacts, then in the build artifacts there will be an artifact called project branch dependencies and then version number, and all the dependencies used for the builds will be in that one. So that would be possible. But it's not something that local Debian would look at this time. That is what I talked about, something we could do in the future instead of building, actually just taking things from the repo or from the latest good build and grabbing that to create the Debian with. Any more questions? Comments? While people are writing their questions, these office hours calls, we're going to do them monthly this year, except for July and December. The reason for not doing them in December is obviously that we'll put them on the last Tuesday in the month, and it's a bad date in December, I think. So we'll alternate between a morning time and an afternoon time here in Copenhagen. So we give US people a chance to attend, and also people from the Asia Pacifics. Another question, maybe I should ask questions, but I don't know if I can get an answer. I saw that people can give thumbs up on things, but how many people or try to like find the thumbs up thingy, and if you're working on implementing ALGO, then press the thumbs up button and let's see how many people on the call would be doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like a 10-ish, 11, 12 people out of the people on the call around that. Or probably, yeah. Okay. And I guess that the remaining people would then be actual users of ALGO. Wouldn't make sense to join an office hours call and not have a clue about what ALGO was. So instead of, if you don't have a question, you can type into the chat. What has the biggest challenge been for implementing ALGO? What are you like? What are you running into? What would you like us to document better or do better for you as a startup? Is there a possibility to run? There's another question here. So, is there a possibility to run all workflows on a self-hosted runner and not just the builds without editing the YAML files? Yes, there is, Thomas. There are two settings that determines which runners you use. There's the GitHub runner, which determines what runners are being used for the build jobs, and then there's the runs on that determines what workflow, what runners are being used for all the other ones. So if you set runs -on to self-hosted or the name of your self-hosted runners and run the update ALGO system files, we will set the runs on in all the YAML files to be your self-hosted runner, except for the update ALGO system files. The update ALGO system files will always use the GitHub hosted runner, and the reason for that is that if your self-hosted runner is for some reason no longer working or crashed or whatever, then you cannot change the self-hosted runners because you do that using the update ALGO system files, meaning that that one needs to be on a GitHub hosted runner. Now, I'm sure that update ALGO system files is not the workflow that is going to take all of your GitHub free minutes. So I think that one would be fine to have as a GitHub hosted runner. You do like this. I think that is a link to see the documentation for runs on. To comment here. Makes sense. What about the runner groups? Is that a possibility? Yeah, so what you specify in runs on or GitHub runner is exactly what's being used in runs on. So if you use runner group name there or tags in the runner, that same thing. So yeah. So Florian says, follow up to Thomas's question. Our self-hosted runner is quite fast, but are there any recommendation regarding the setup of the server, hardware, software, etc.? So we will always, you guys can chime in if you want, but I think our goal is to be as efficient as possible on the GitHub hosted runners, meaning that if you need to like see what you need to install, look at that. We'll find the URL for that one and post in the chat. The software that is installed there. You don't need all the software. We could actually probably do a list of what we need instead of like, there's no reason for them to install everything that is on the GitHub hosted runner. So let's write down that if we don't have it, we'll create a list of the software needed for that one. As to memory, it really depends on the size of your app. Some cases, very large apps will, in order to be published into a container, actually use quite a bit of memory. And some of the GitHub hosted runners might not be big enough for that, but you can have large runners, or you can have self-hosted runners that have more memory. So it's possible. But we'll create some documentation that describes the what needs to be.
I have a little list of some software. I'll share that in the question.
Okay.
Like .NET, for example, and GitHub Apply and PowerShell and these things. It might not be complete.
Okay. I'll take a note that we need to make sure that that list is complete, so we can share that. We have Inge. What I'm missing, trying to implement Go for GitHub in an organization, is that it often looked as a developer tool instead of a tool to maintain a well-running BC implementation. So like more documentation on management level that will explain the total value of the DevOps processes supported by the Go for GitHub. Okay. Wise words there, Inge. We'll take a note of that. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure that like over time, that's also something that's going to help us convince people that doing everything yourself is not necessarily the most efficient way or the most economic way going forward. So is there a possibility to deploy some test data to containers during pipeline run, posting groups, etc.? Yeah, so you can have what they call configuration packages. And remember the actual setting of that. There's a setting called something that you can define. I think it's configuration packages, actually, where you can define which configuration packages are applied during build. We'll find the link to the documentation for that one. And you can apply that even per localization, so you can have a different configuration package. If you're running the tests for US version, for Danish version, and for Italy version, you can have 3 different config packages for those. Config packages is Manish.
We also have an override called import test data in BC container. So if you add a script called that, then you can also do whatever custom thing you need to do for for configuration packages and demo data or whatever.
Yeah. If you like to do things in code, you can do that.
There is one question in the chat as well. It's been posted there.
Yeah, we'll go to the chat in a second. Would the new resources function work in the .app as well? Todd, can you ask that as a separate question? I'm not sure that I understand that one. But let's look in the chat. If I need to sign the build app using another CA's vault, not AC key vault, do I need to write my signing script? If so, should I include installing navzip or other prereqs? So what we utilize for this is .NET Sign for doing the signing. And if .NET Sign can sign your app using whatever, where you have your your certificate, that would be our. I mean, that we would recommend that. We would not recommend you to write your own code and maintain that and other things. If you find that .NET Sign can do what you need, but you need like to add another setting or whatever to support other CA's vaults as well, please work with us, and we might be able to actually include that in ALGO so that our signing mechanism could work with that if it's not too big of a change. So yeah, feel free to create a PR on our repository, and we'll work with you to figure out whether that's possible or not. For AL 14.2, we can include resources in the app itself. For a test app, we could use the resource in the initialization step. The tests, it would be just a different means of loading some configuration data. Yeah, so I think you're onto something here, Todd. And actually, configuration packages are, if we are looking into the future, going away. So we're not. Right now we're shipping config packages. We had a few weeks where we did not, but we are reshipping them. But we know they'll be going away, so we're deprecating the config packages as part of the DVD or part of our artifacts. We're not deprecating the functionality of config packages. We'll still maintain that, but we're not going to ship our extended demo data as config packages. We're going to ship that as apps instead. Kind of like what Todd is referring to here, like having an app that would actually encode, create the demo data, and that's what we're going to ship as well. So in the future, we'll replace the shipped config packages with demo data apps, and yes, that would be a good way of doing that yourself as well, to not have a dependency of some demo data that is in a config package somewhere that will go away in the future. And I expect, and I haven't tried working with the resources in the app, but I strongly assume that you could use that for that purpose, yes.
There was one question before.
Oh. Regarding the telemetry data from ALGO, quite a lot is recorded, and we can already evaluate various things for ourselves, especially PR things. Are there already some KQL queries from you can provide? Or that you use yourself to analyze usage on errors? Does anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, we don't have that available, but I think it's a good idea. I think it's a very relatively new module in ALGO, but I think that is something we could work on adding. I think that would benefit more people, maybe even like a dashboard or something we can share.
Yeah, probably a dashboard that people could see there. Yeah,
good idea.
And then if we're missing something in telemetry, we can add it so that the dashboard becomes more alive. Maybe we can do actually even put the dashboard inside of the repo so that it's open source as well. Would be nice.
We have a follow-up in the chat.
So the old sign tool of the SDK wouldn't work? I guess it would. I mean, I haven't. If you use the old sign tool, you definitely have to download the nav zip library yourself and install that and all of these things. That happens automatically with .NET Sign. But yes, you could go through sign tool and stuff like that. If you do that, then we would not take that as a PR to ALGO. We've decided on .NET Sign, and we'll until further prove that that's the wrong way, we'll stick to that. I mean, we think that is the right choice. And please put your questions in the Q&A tab instead of in the chat. That helps a lot to get everything in one location, and we can collect that afterwards. I can scroll in the chat. Q&A thing now. So my Q&A pane is now stuck.
There's nothing.
Okay. Now I can scroll again. Okay. And as said before, thanks a lot to Inge for sharing what he thinks it would take for us to make ALGO easier to install or more digestible to organizations. If other people have things we should consider, yeah, please speak up. We'd very much like to know. Florian Dietrich asks, so we have the issue that old PTEs are remaining published but uninstalled in extensions list after deployments. Gets a little cluttered. Yeah, so I think I've seen that before in the GitHub issues as well. I don't think there is an unpublished mechanism in the API right now, but I can definitely double check that. So they'll be unpublished when you get the next major or next minor update. I think that is where they get unpublished. But can we unpublish during deployment to environment? I'll take that as an action item and see if that's possible. Todd asks, is there training available somewhere for the developers? And it's hard to manage the training on my own. Yeah, the ALGO workshop, as Maria says, is probably the best starting place. But that one probably needs some love and attention as well. But we'll leave it at that. One thing I learned is that the ALGO workshop talks a lot about setting up ALGO and like importing your apps and stuff like that. Another workshop that we should do, or we should create somewhere, is using ALGO. So now you have it set up, and you have like people who needs to work with GitHub and ALGO on a daily basis. What do? Because they don't go to GitHub and create a new repository and stuff like that. They'll be working with it as users more than as, but that probably, yeah, swings back to Inge's comment about it's a developer tool more than it's something that management can understand. But also, yeah, consultants and other users probably gotten that feedback as well. Yeah, using the ALGO workshop would be great. Yeah, that's put that on our list of things to document. Got 3 thumbs up in a second, so One of the challenges, so Emmanuel asks, one of the challenges to push the customers to migrate to ALGO for GitHub from Azure DevOps is SSO. Do we have that in ALGO, SSO?
Single sign-on.
Single sign-on?
Um,
Well, I do sign on to.
yeah, that's, I think, an organizational level can be forced. At least it's forced for Microsoft organization.
And we need to sign in with our Microsoft credentials and using the Microsoft organization as that, and use MFA as we do with all other Microsoft resources. So yes, I'm pretty sure you can set that up on the organizational level, and if your user belongs to that organization, you'll be forced to do that. So there's still a future topics in the ALGO for GitHub workshop. Are they coming? Yeah, well, future topics is for the future. And like, we'll give rebates tomorrow is what it says in the shop wall, right? No, yeah, definitely, but it's something we need to prioritize some more about the documentation piece of this. They've been lying around there for too long. So expect more over the next months. I'll try to maybe schedule a day every week where I'll do documentation work instead of other stuff. That's probably the way to do this, instead of waiting for like a chunk of time where you have time to actually do these things. Probably, yeah, set aside a day a week to document is probably a good way. Emmanuel says, in that case, how can we set the connection to the key vault that now use Azure Credentials Secret? The connection to the key vault, the Azure Credentials Secret can be done in a few ways. So you can use what's called federated credentials, or you can use an AAD app that has access to the key vault. You typically don't use users for that. So you still have the Azure credentials in there in order to pinpoint the access to the key vault, but not through a user, but through a AAD app or using federated credentials, as said before. Okay, there's like 7 minutes left. I think there is documentation on federated credentials, but yes, I will write that down. But we need that in the workshop. A term that has always confused me is single project versus multi-project. Can you clarify in the ALGO context? So, yeah, so ALGO has you can have any number of ALGO repositories, and every repository can have any number of projects, and every project can have any number of apps. So an app is not a project, but an ALGO project is a collection of apps that are typically installed together. A repository is a collection of projects that are typically released together. So does that make sense? The idea of the multi-project is that you can have like you can have like a W1 version of your app, and then you can have an Italy and a Danish version of the app. The reason for having projects there is that the Danish version and the Italy version of your app will compile with the Italy version of Business Central artifacts, and the Danish one with the Danish version, and the W1 one with the worldwide version of that, obviously. And that would be 3 different projects where DK and IT would be have a dependency on the W1 one, and that would then you build W1 first, and then the other countries afterwards, and you can then publish the Italy one to an Italy environment, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason for having that is because this is one app. You have like 3 different localizations of it. It belongs into one repository. Sometimes you'd also have a common or miscellaneous where you have like an app with like licensing functionality or whatever. You can put that as a project in your repository. But if you have other repositories, other apps, it might belong in a separate repository. And the recommendation is for repositories in the same organization to use GitHub packages as your dependency resolution for all the apps that are in the same organization, because that would be like automated. Now, if you don't have very strict borders between your apps and like you're changing things in some of the base apps together with some of the depending apps, then you might put them in one repository, obviously, and that's totally fine as well. But our recommendation is to split them so that a repository is what you release, and a project is what you install. And obviously, if a project depends on another project, that would be installed together with that project as well. If we make changes to the Italy project, is it possible to build only that app while having 2 other projects in the same repository? Emmanuel asks. So today, not. After we merge the incremental builds PR that comes in preview in the next few weeks, it will be possible to enable incremental builds, and as such, only build the apps that are changed and only deploy the apps that have changed there as well. I'll just take a note here. Florian asks, how is the script for creation of local Debian behaving when using a multi-project repository? So the local Debian is actually in the .algo folder, which is in a project. So you're creating a development environment for that project that you're working on. I do know that some people would like to have a local Debian and working on all projects at the same time. That's not how local Debian works at the moment. But I think, yeah, as I said before in this meeting, also we might have a look at local Debian to see if we can make that smarter, better behaving than it does today. So let's have a look at that. Local Debian for all projects would be nice. Yeah, so the problem is that, oh yeah, you could do that. So no problem. Sorry. You obviously, if you had a Danish version and an Italy version, you wouldn't be able to create a container for both those. Then you create 2 containers, obviously. All right. So your container kind of have to be connected to one of the projects because that one carries the artifacts, but you could load the other projects in VS Code, I guess. Yeah, we'll have to think about that one, Florian. Emmanuel asks, do we need a license when developing in a local environment an app source app? You do not need it for developing that. You need the license, you need the object range in order to deploy to app source. But the Kronos license that is included in the artifacts is a perfectly good development license, and you don't need to have a local license file for that sake. But again, yeah, you need your object range, and you need to be registered as a publisher with app source in order to develop and publish app source apps. I think time's up. Let's say anything in the chat. Same here. I've not started on the ALGO yet, but need to understand the possibilities. We do our best, Eric, to do that. And good to see you here, Eric. It's been a while. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining, everybody, and looking forward to see many of you in a month or in 2 months from now. Thank you.
Thank you.